the government efficiency committee, this idea of Donald Trump saying, hey, I'm going to promise a gig here to Elon Musk. I don't have all the details. Some of it's ambiguous. Your thoughts on that committee, your thoughts on what Elon Musk would look like. And then really, what does that mean in terms of the totality, this messy depth of all these other companies Elon Musk is involved in, if he were to accept some type of formal role with the next Trump administration?
The thought of a government efficiency group, committee, whatever, that makes me so happy to hear as a taxpayer. A huge percentage of our taxes are going to the federal government. We know that a huge amount of it goes to the military. We know a huge amount of it goes to healthcare, right? But the biggest chunk of our paycheck is federal costs. And if you look at the effectiveness of those dollars, I'll use Boeing as a perfect example, okay? If you've been following this Boeing Starliner thing, going to space, okay? They made a deal with NASA somewhere in the $5 billion range that Boeing got from the government, the federal government, to put into space, okay? SpaceX got half of that amount-ish, about 2.6, 2.8, I forget what the exact number was, half the amount. And the goal was to create capacity in the United States to send astronauts to space with the government outsourcing a lot of this stuff to the private sector, right? Boeing sent those astronauts to space, right? And I'm sure everybody has heard this. They're stuck in the International Space Station because the capsule didn't work right, okay? And that was their first launch after 6 years or something. It took them 6 years to do one launch and they messed it up, okay? In the same amount of time, SpaceX has done that mission like 13 times for half the price, okay? Now extrapolate that to literally every single thing the government spends money on. There is like stories, and I know people close to me that tell stories about the military, that there are people literally just they're shooting rounds into the mountain, hundreds of thousands of rounds, just wasting the rounds so that they get the same amount in the budget next year so they can justify the same amount. So they have to waste all this money so they get the same amount of money next year. Extrapolate this to every single other government thing that we're doing. So it's very easy to see that we're extremely inefficient when it comes to spending our money. We are not very good at understanding where the money's going. And so props to President Trump, and really props to Elon for bringing this up as an idea even. We need something like that. However, what does that mean from an execution perspective? Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, XAI, Boring Company, Starlink. He's in a lot of industries. He's in a lot of industries that are probably in at least connected in an adjacent manner to the things that he would be looking to say make more efficient. Even if you look at the military, right? They have different contracts with Starlink and SpaceX. Okay, how is Elon going to be able to go in and be like, we need to save money over here, but we shouldn't save money over here because that's going to impact my business, right? And I'm not saying he's going to do that. That's the conflict of interest part that comes in. So does that mean he has to divest from SpaceX and Tesla and stuff, which I don't see happening?
Yeah.
What does this committee look like? Is it more of a recommendation committee and then you offload that to a different party to allow them to execute? But if that party is the government, then what's the likelihood that's going to get executed, right? Mm-hmm. I'm curious to see what the logistics are behind this. It's a brilliant idea. I don't have a lot of hope that it's going to actually get executed because there's going to be a lot of conflict of interest, but I could be wrong. And I hope I'm wrong on that because that's one that I'm very happy to be wrong on.
I hadn't thought about this until you were talking, but here's what it reminds me of. Remember when Musk took over Twitter and he came in with the whole kitchen sink?
Yes.
The kitchen sink bit. This to me is Trump being like, bro, do you want to carry the kitchen sink into the federal government and get rid of all the waste? But here's what happened, right? As soon as the artist formerly known as Twitter started crapping out, started failing, Musk tried to do the endorsement interview, the launch interview with Ron DeSantis, everything crashed. He tried to do this other high profile thing, everything crashed.
Yeah.
What does everyone on Twitter say? Well, bro, here's the receipt. You fired all these people. You came in and you said, we're going to cut the fat, we're going to cut the waste, blah, blah. And now you have a platform when you want everyone to listen and it's not working right now.
Yeah.
Don't you run the risk of that with the federal government, with Elon Musk
1,000%.
bringing in and now saying, cool, bro, you cut all this spending. Now we have no money for these natural resources because you, Donald Trump, entrusted the dude from Tesla, respectfully, and all these other companies to cut the fat for the federal government.
They will be screaming bloody murder the second the slightest bit of weakness is sensed in that execution, because there will be weakness by default. By default, if you have a very inefficient system and you have a lot of people tied to that system, the second you start cutting, you're going to have incredible amount of problems because the system is not working the way it's supposed to be. And the way you shine light on those problems is that you delete everything. I learned this from my time at Tesla. You delete everything and you let the problems come up. And then you make the priority list of here are the most important ones, fix. The luxury Elon has with a private company or even with a public company is that he's the boss. So he can shoulder the pain and the noise and the chaos, and the teams there can shoulder the pain, the noise, and the chaos and fight through that noise. And that's how huge change gets done, is that you overcome in the face of adversity and just chaos, right? The federal government, there are people that are going to look for failure so that they can use it to leverage their own political gain, their own game, right? This is like a completely different thing that's going on here. So it's a brilliant point. It's a brilliant point. It will totally happen. People will ask for this to be reverted immediately. Do you remember when the US, when we weren't able to pass a budget? I think it was like 5-6 years ago or something. And the air traffic control went down for a day. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, pass it. Forget it. Yeah, go ahead and pass it. So that's what's going to happen. It's going to be something similar to that. So unless they're willing to shoulder that on, if they're able to execute, this would be literally one of the greatest feats of all time, is to take this ridiculous, super bloated, inefficient thing and then fix it. And good luck doing that in 4 years.
Listen, and of course, every congressional cycle, you get people that run for office and they run on a comparable platform, right? The idea of cutting the waste, cutting the fat, whatever, this isn't new in and of itself. To turn the power of whatever this looks like into the hands of someone like Musk would certainly be new. My man, this has been a long conversation. I do want to sneak in one more bit here if I can.
Of course.
It's back to that Boeing thing. Despite all the controversies, despite all of the issues, you still sit there and you say Elon Musk as a business leader. Like, to me, SpaceX is one of the greatest things. I am such a big SpaceX fan. I think NASA is only having the moment that it is because of SpaceX. I think the Artemis missions are really only possible because of a SpaceX. And now I feel like SpaceX is coming in and saving the ass of Boeing with regards to, as you said, these astronauts on the ISS. How do you see that playing out? And does that strengthen Elon Musk's hands a bit to negotiate with the government, maybe even negotiate with a future President Harris if Trump loses the election, to say, hey, you may not like everything that I do, but let's not forget what some of my companies have done to help support NASA and other federal government initiatives.
For sure it does. I think it would be silly I hope if the Harris administration wins, they don't do like a Biden 2.0 where you ignore the good that he has created for the United States sovereignty and their national security, without a doubt. If it wasn't for SpaceX and Tesla and Starlink, the United States would be in a worse place. It just would, objectively speaking, we would not be in as good a place as we are now. And so my hope is that a lot of the rhetoric now is just a bunch of posturing, politics. God, like you said, we're 45 minutes away, 45 days. It feels like minutes, 5 days, like seconds even. We're very close to an election. There's going to be a ton of rhetoric. It's going to be, especially this one with the assassination attempts. It's crazy. We live in a crazy time right now. But I do think Elon, the longer time passes, the more leverage he has, especially as his competitors are not doing anything to get any closer to him from a capability perspective. I mean, like Boeing, I'll say it is a national embarrassment when it comes to this stuff. It is awful. As a taxpayer, I can't believe that I'm watching a company that large with that much pedigree waste taxpayer money the way they're doing it. It's crazy. And then you look at their 747, the 7 failures and stuff. That's crazy too. Just so on and so forth. GM's falling behind from an EV perspective. Ford, they're trying their best, but they're nowhere close. The only ones that are really keeping track with Tesla from a legacy perspective are brands like Kia, Hyundai. BMW is doing a pretty good job, honestly, with their luxury brands and stuff. And then you have the Chinese. And then everything else is freaking Chinese, just overtaking. So the longer time passes, the more leverage he has. I do hope that regardless of which president wins, I do think there is room for these people, whoever it is, to come together with the ultimate goal of making the United States into a more powerful player for the next generation systems for transportation and energy and space. Because if we do that, we win. And it just so happens that we have one guy leading that, again, with all his flaws. But I personally believe his heart is in the right place. And I think as a United States, we have to figure out how to work together with this guy. We have to leverage, I call him a laser. The biography of Walter Isaacson really put this sort of image in my head, is that Elon Musk is the most powerful laser humanity has. And sometimes that laser gets pointed at the wrong thing. Sometimes it's, politics, divisive rhetoric, just and he goes hardcore. But I think as a society, we should embrace the power and talent of this guy and help guide that laser towards more productive stuff. And when you just sideline the guy, he's going to start pointing that laser to places where it's not going to be as productive. So
I think a lot of people might agree with me when I say, man, can we just shift the laser away from the controversies? Go back to the rockets, man. We got another star launch coming up. You're getting us back on the lunar lander with the Artemis
freedom
mission.
of speech, baby. Freedom
of speech. Please focus on these other things. And it's not a personal thing either, right? You got analysts like Dan Ives at Wedbush Securities who cover Tesla. They say a lot of these other things are kind of distractions from time to time. Yeah, go ahead.
If I can say one thing, I don't think you get that without the other thing. That's just the truth. I think it's just reality of humanity. Humans are gray. We are imperfect. We are complex, right? And if there's one thing I can take away from the Elon Musk arc, is that he is the most perfect example of the duality of man. It's just, if you get extreme success, you're also going to get some extreme weirdness going on that is enabling that success. That same exact thing that feeds the brilliance also feeds the chaos. And in reality, I'm a firm believer of this. You cannot have brilliance without chaos in some form. It's just, he has decided that the world gets to see the chaos. And here you go. So we'll see.
My man, this is an awesome conversation. We ran long, but I'm grateful for your time because there's just a lot of really important stuff here at the intersection of all these to get into. As far as I'm Misbahi, former longtime Tesla insider, very grateful for your perspective tonight, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I can go on for hours. Next time, let's make it a 3-hour conversation.
Let's do it. We'll be a little closer to the election. These stories are not going away even after the election because whoever wins, it's going to be a fascinating look for how Elon Musk plays a role. So we'll continue the conversation. Thanks, Farzad.
Thank you.